All right, future diplomats, let's get right into it. You're prepping for the UPSC, right? Specifically, that international relations paper.
Absolutely. It's a challenging one.
Yeah, and that's why you're here. For the deep dive.
Here we go.
Today, we're going deep on a thinker, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His ideas, well, let's just say they're still making waves in international relations centuries later.
That's for sure.
From peace plans to, get this, women's roles, his work, it's just packed with stuff that, well, you're going to see it pop up in international relations all the time.
Oh, yeah. He's a foundational thinker.
And I've got just the person to help us unpack all of this. Our expert, well, let's just say that they have a knack for connecting the dots. You know, the ones that seem totally unrelated.
I do my best. It's all about understanding the big picture.
And Rousseau, he's definitely part of that big picture.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, let's jump right in. Now, this might surprise you, but back in the 18th century, everyone was obsessed with, well, peace. Lasting peace.
It was a time of great upheaval, so the desire for stability was pretty strong.
Think about it. Leagues of nations, federations, they were like drawing up blueprints for like the early European Union.
Right. They were grappling with this idea of a world without war, which was pretty revolutionary for the time. Thinkers like William Penn, Abbé de Saint-Pierre, and of course Rousseau, they were all putting forward their own vision.
It was a time when republicanism and democracy, those ideas were like gaining traction.
Definitely a shift in thinking about how society should be governed.
And there was this feeling that war, well, maybe it wasn't inevitable.
A glimmer of hope in a world often defined by conflict.
Okay, so Rousseau, his plan, it was, well, audacious.
To say the least.
He pictured this, like, permanent alliance of nations, settling disputes peacefully, binding laws, a strong force to make sure, like, no one breaks the rules, no backing out. Think of it like a super strict international agreement.
It was a bold vision for sure, but to really grasp why it didn't pan out, we have to look at what was going on back then.
Yeah, the historical context, it matters.
The world was all about power politics, competition for resources, and, let's be real, a major lack of trust between nations.
Yeah, not exactly the ideal environment for, like, global cooperation.
Not at all. And that made implementing something like Rousseau's collective security system, well, practically impossible.
So those obstacles to peace, I mean, greed, ambition, you know, national self-interest always clashing with, well, the greater good.
Classic dilemmas, right? The individual versus the collective.
Do any of those sound familiar today? I mean, think about the UN, for example, all those challenges they face.
Oh, absolutely. It shows that these ideas of Rousseau, they can help us understand why it's so hard for countries to cooperate, even now.
We've made progress, right, with international law and institutions?
We have, but those fundamental issues, they're still driving global politics today. It's like this underlying tension that never really goes away.
Okay, now hold on tight, because we're about to take a sharp turn here. Rousseau, he wasn't all about peace and harmony, you know?
No, he wasn't.
His views on women and, like, their place in society, let's just say they were a little controversial.
This is where things get really interesting and maybe a little uncomfortable. Rousseau, the champion of individual freedom and equality, advocating for a social order where women were, well, let's just say, not equal to men.
It's almost a paradox, isn't it?
Definitely a contradiction that needs unpacking.
So he believed in these, like, natural differences between men and women.
Right, a sort of essentialism that informs his whole worldview.
And the family, that was like the bedrock of society.
The foundation,
Yeah.
but a very specific type of family structure.
Super patriarchal.
Exactly. With men as the heads of households, women confined to the domestic sphere.
He believed that a woman's virtue was tied to her, well, sexuality. Specifically, chastity, obedience, gentleness.
A very limited and limiting view of women's capabilities.
And his ideas about education for women. Even more striking.
He argued that women should focus on practical skills, domestic duties, nurturing, not intellectual pursuits. Definitely not challenging the status quo.
Which seems, well, a bit jarring. When you remember, you know, he was critiquing original sin, emphasizing the natural goodness of humanity.
Right, a real tension there. It makes you wonder how we can reconcile these seemingly opposite aspects of his philosophy.
It's a question scholars have been wrestling with for centuries. Some say, well, Rousseau was just a product of his time, reflecting the norms of his era.
It's a common argument, but it doesn't fully account for the complexities of his thought.
Others say, maybe, in his mind, he was trying to create a harmonious society.
Right, a society where each sex played its natural role. But of course, we have to question what natural really means in this context.
And as you're diving into Rousseau for the UPSC, Think about this. Are these debates about gender roles, are they still relevant in feminism today?
They absolutely are.
How do they connect to current discussions about women's rights, representation, agency in the international arena?
They're all intertwined. Rousseau's ideas, even the problematic ones, can help us understand how far we've come and how far we still need to go.
It's like a link between the past and the present. A reminder that progress is ongoing.
And that we need to keep pushing for greater equality in all spheres of life. And it's a reminder that even the most influential thinkers, well, they can have ideas that don't exactly age well.
Yeah, it's a learning process, right? Understanding these historical debates can help us look at what we believe now, with a more critical eye, and maybe work towards a world that's a little more, well, just and inclusive.
Exactly. Recognizing those limitations is crucial for growth and progress.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Something else super relevant for the UPSC, Rousseau's impact on how we think about politics. He had this really interesting take on human nature.
He did. It was quite different from the prevailing views of his time.
He didn't see us as, like, inherently good or bad, more like capable of change, transformation.
He believed in our capacity to evolve both individually and as a society.
This idea, it's at the heart of his social contract theory, which, by the way, is like a cornerstone of political philosophy. Rousseau's thinking, it was all about how humans, in their natural state, they were free and equal.
That natural state, that was a key concept for him.
But to live together in a society, well, you have to give up some of that freedom.
A necessary trade-off, he argued.
All right, in exchange for security, and the benefits of being part of a community.
It's about finding that balance, the individual and the collective. That's the essence of the social contract.
So it's more than just like solving conflicts. It's about creating this system where individuals can actually thrive.
Exactly. It's about fostering human potential within a social framework.
But hold on, isn't there some tension here? I mean, Rousseau seems to be talking about individual sovereignty and state sovereignty. How did he, reconcile those two ideas? They seem kind of opposite.
That's one of the most fascinating and debated aspects of Rousseau's work. He tries to find this middle ground between individual freedom and the authority of the state. And he does it through this concept of the general will.
Okay, the general will, I have to admit, this one always trips me up a little.
It can be a tricky concept to grasp, for sure.
It seems simple on the surface, but then it gets really complex really fast.
It's like this onion, layers and layers of meaning.
So can we break this down a bit? The general will, it's like the collective wisdom of society, right? Or like the shared desire of the people.
You're on the right track. But Rousseau saw it as something deeper than just the sum of individual desires. It's not just about what everyone wants personally. It's about what's best for society as a whole, even if some individuals disagree.
So it's like this higher ideal, this concept of the common good, even if it goes against what some people want.
Precisely. And this idea has been, well, let's just say it's had a mixed legacy.
Some people see it as the basis for democracy, right?
Yeah,
The idea
yeah.
that the government should represent the will of the people.
That's one interpretation, for sure. The idea of popular sovereignty.
But others say, well, it can be twisted to justify authoritarianism.
That's the danger, isn't it? When leaders claim to embody the general will while suppressing dissent.
It's a powerful concept that can be used in very different ways.
And that's exactly what makes Rousseau so relevant for the UPSC. He makes us think critically about power, about legitimacy, about the whole relationship between the individual and the state.
His work, it's like this treasure chest of ideas, insights that are still shaping political theory and practice today. Understanding these ideas, it can give you a real edge in the exam.
It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about engaging with the ideas and seeing how they connect to the world we live in.
So as you're diving deeper into Rousseau, don't just focus on the facts and figures.
No, go deeper than that.
Really grapple with his ideas, analyze those arguments, and think about how they've been interpreted throughout history.
Because interpretations change over time, and that's important to recognize.
And remember, there's not always one right answer.
It's about showing you can think critically, analyze thoughtfully, and connect those historical ideas to current issues.
That's what will impress those examiners.
Showing that you can make those connections, that's what demonstrates a deep understanding of the material.
And don't be afraid to, question Rousseau's ideas.
Oh, absolutely. Critical thinking is key.
Look for the flaws in his arguments, consider other perspectives, and think about how his ideas could be, improved or expanded to create a more just and fair world.
Because that's the ultimate goal, right? To use these ideas to make a positive impact on the world.
It's like we're putting Rousseau's ideas into action, you know, using education to, well, better ourselves, not just for the exam, but for life in general.
That's the spirit. It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge and critical thinking.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive on Rousseau, there's one more thing I want to touch on, something we talked about earlier, his views on, well, women.
Right. His ideas about gender roles, it's an important aspect of his work to consider, especially given his emphasis on equality in other areas.
He was all about equality, but his vision, it didn't quite, extend to full gender equality.
Yeah, it's a bit of a blind spot, isn't it? A reminder that even brilliant minds can be influenced by the prevailing norms of their time.
So how should we, you know, deal with these less savory aspects of his work? Do we just ignore them? Or is there something to be learned from, like, really looking at them critically?
I think it's important to acknowledge those limitations, not to dismiss Rousseau's contributions, but to understand that ideas can evolve. What might have been considered progressive in one era might seem outdated or even problematic in another.
It's like a reminder that progress is never really finished.
Exactly. We need to constantly reevaluate our beliefs and assumptions, even those rooted in the ideas of great thinkers.
So as you're studying Rousseau, and really as you're engaging with any thinker or theory, don't be afraid to challenge what you're reading.
Question those assumptions.
Look for those gaps in the logic and think about how those ideas could be, expanded, maybe even refined to create a more inclusive and just world.
It's about using these historical ideas as a springboard for critical thinking and for imagining new possibilities.
And remember, this journey of learning, it doesn't stop when you finish the exam.
It's a lifelong endeavor.
The insights you gain from thinkers like Rousseau, they'll stay with you. They'll shape how you see the world long after you've aced those UPSC papers.
That's the power of engaging with these big ideas. They challenge us, they make us think differently, and they ultimately help us grow.
It's like we're all on this path of discovery together, trying to understand politics, society, the world around us. And hopefully, through these deep dives, we can, give you the knowledge and the tools to make a real difference.
I like that, a path of discovery. It captures the spirit of what we're trying to do here.
Okay, well, it looks like we've reached the end of our Rousseauian adventure.
Time flies when you're deep diving.
Before we go, though, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
And give us a like if you found this episode helpful.
Share it with your fellow UPSC preppers. Spread the knowledge, and let's keep those intellectual conversations going.
Because the more we engage with these ideas, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the complexities of the world.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.
And keep diving deep.
See you in the next episode.